But I don't know anybody who's not talking about tariffs. I mean, do you know that March Madness is happening? We're in the Final Four, and nobody seems to care
four
about
number
that
one
anymore.
seeds.
They all care about, tariffs. So he's already accomplished one thing, and that is it's on everybody's mind. They think it's going to be an elixir for our financial problems. At least that's the way he's selling it. And yet Wall Street's scared to death, from what I can tell. They're shivering in their boots as to what's going to happen tomorrow. And as you point out, nobody really knows until we hear it from the big man. So I'm content to wait and see. But the bottom line is, I think we all have to brace for whatever the impact of this is. If they are talking about raising hundreds of billions of dollars through tariff regimes, that means they're not going to be insignificant. They're not going to be pinprick, and they're going to be more permanent than short. And that means that the markets are going to have a real hard time digesting that.
Well, and when we consider the revenue raising aspects of this, Congresswoman, obviously this is seen, and many of his members of his administration have told us you can't view tariffs separately from taxes, which is a whole other battle. And yet if he wants to cut taxes, that revenue needs to come from somewhere else. Is everything he's planning to do this week just setting the stage for that battle still to come?
This is a bit of a shell game because let's be really honest, these tariffs that they're talking about will be raising hundreds of billions, maybe trillions of dollars. They're raising that money off of the American people. Tariffs are paid by the American consumer. It tends to be one of the more regressive taxes because lower income families pay a larger percentage of their income towards the higher price of goods. So this is the largest tax increase on the American people. Set that part aside and let's talk about their plans for a tax cut. So far, the plans for a tax cut predominantly benefit the most wealthy in this country. So at the same time that they're implementing tariffs, essentially a tax increase on the working families, everyday Americans, they're planning to pay for it, use that money to pay for tax cuts for the wealthiest in this country. So I think there's a real problem with that before we even get to what the markets are doing, because the markets understand that tariffs go into effect today. The idea of bringing a factory back to the United States, which we couldn't agree on, is possibly a good thing. That takes 7 to 10 years for that to happen. And so the flight from U.S. equities happens immediately. The rebuild of the economy that this administration is envisioning, if you are generous with the strategy that they're approaching, takes a lot longer and is on a longer time horizon. So what happens in the interim? What happens is everyday Americans pay higher prices. People who are on fixed incomes, reliant on their the markets and their stock portfolio, see a significant decline in their income. And that's before we even talk about what they're doing to Social Security. So I think there are significant impacts to the U.S. economy that go well beyond the little sound bites that we are hearing from this administration. And I think it also takes some honesty about economic principles to reckon with what a tariff is, which is a tax on the American people.
Enter secondary tariffs, Rick Davis, on Russian oil. This is what President Trump was talking about in a telephone interview with NBC News over the weekend, talking about Vladimir Putin specifically. He said he was angry at the Russian president, going even further to say, quote, "You could say I was very angry, pissed off," when Putin yesterday said, started getting into President Volodymyr Zelensky's credibility. He's not seeing the progress he wanted to in the peace talks, Rick, so he's suggesting secondary tariffs, a 25% tariff on all other countries that buy oil from Russia. What do you make of this more recent proposal and the reverse psychology, if that's what it is, with Vladimir Putin?
Well, I hope it's not reverse psychology. Reverse psychology would have been, hey, buddy, friend, you've been an enemy of the United States for a long time, but I'm going to make you popular with the rest of the world if you just do a deal with me. Shock. Donald Trump, was lied to by Vladimir Putin. There is no chance Vladimir Putin's going to cut a deal with Donald Trump to lay down his arms on the Ukrainian border. And so I think it's great. Do the secondary sanctions. Try to get everybody who's doing business with Russia to stop doing it. I thought that was one of the failings of the Biden administration, is they didn't squeeze hard enough. There was always an out for Vladimir Putin on resurrecting his economy. If you talk to the folks at the Pentagon, they'll tell you within the next 12 months, his economy will implode, and it's a totally different negotiation than what we're trying to do today. So I think it's great. Keep going, Donald Trump. Go after Vladimir Putin. Say all these things, initiate all these sanctions and tariffs, and I think you stand a better chance of getting a deal.
Well, given the way that the president has spoken about Vladimir Putin in the not so distant past, just recently up until his description of being angry with him now, compared to how he's been talking about and interacting with the Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelensky, Congresswoman, do you take heart in this kind of change of tone here?
No, it sounds like a lover spurned. I mean, he has been kowtowing to Putin and is admiring of his leadership style, has been trying to work a deal. And I think he really went into it thinking that, Putin would want this. What he doesn't understand about an autocrat and Putin is that when he senses the ability to get more than what he what's at the table, he's going to do it. And so he's pushing him. And so this is Trump just responding in the moment that his overtures to his buddy didn't work out the way that he wanted them to. So yes, I think, if we are strong and tough the way that Rick's former boss, Senator McCain, was towards Russia, and that was the consistent message that America was sending, that's one thing. But what we're seeing here is just somebody who is disappointed that his strategy didn't turn out the way that he wanted it to, because he does want the Ukraine war, just as the American people want the Ukraine war to be over. But at what price? So I think I have a slightly different take on what exactly is happening here. But of course, for the good of Ukraine and for the good of the world, we do want to see an end to that conflict. We want to see a just end to that conflict that can sustain, and that requires some security guarantees, which apparently this administration isn't willing to engage in.
Well, we talk a lot about promises made, promises kept around here with regard to tariffs, mass deportations, presumably Trump tax cuts, depending on how things go on Capitol Hill. But Rick, remember one of the initial promises when Donald Trump was getting into this race, and even before he got into it, was that if I were president, I could end this war on day one. He could do it in hours. He had it worked out in his mind. This is one promise that could be difficult to keep. What do you think happens next?
Yeah, you raise an important point, because the American public agrees with what Stephanie Murphy just said. They want to see this conflict ended, but they also want to see it ended properly. And that means that Ukraine is able to function as a vibrant democracy, with a full economy and acceptance into Europe and NATO. So that's what's clear in all the polling. That's what our public policy experts, want to see happen. And if that doesn't happen, then it's going to be a failure of the Trump administration. And right now, I think that it's too soon to tell how this is going to be marked for the midterms. But considering the popularity rating of this administration, the precarious nature of the division within the House of Representatives, you really have to wonder what the last 2 years of this administration is going to look like if the House flips, the Senate gets tighter, and this administration starts to lose the backing of the public that supported it to begin with.